So on June 1st, there was a change to the way that the companion mechanic works, and the question we're asking today is, are companions still viable for Commander play? Welcome back, everyone. So as of June 1st, they changed the companion rule, and the way the mechanic works now is, once per game, anytime you could cast a sorcery during your main phase when the stack is empty, you can pay 3 generic mana to put your companion from your sideboard into your hand. This is a special action, not an activated ability. Now, one thing I should mention before we go on is sideboards do not exist in Commander, so the Rules Committee has released a statement on this change. And basically all it says is that when you pay the 3, the companion goes from outside of the game into your hand, instead of from a sideboard into your hand. So the Rules Committee has not made a decision to change the way that sideboards work in Commander. There are still no sideboards. But I don't know, maybe it makes sense to revisit that at some point. There's 2 things that I really want to work from the sideboard in Commander, and that's Cunning Wish and Spawnsire of Ulamog. Those are just personal wishes of mine. All in all, I think changing the sideboard rules for Commander would be a pretty inert change. I don't think it would really impact all that much. Just my personal take on it. But anyway, yes, the main idea here is that instead of coming from a sideboard in Commander, it just comes from outside the game, goes to your hand. And then just for the sake of being thorough, you'll also notice that there were some ban changes to Standard and Historic. Agent of Treachery is banned, Fires of Invention is banned in both Standard and Historic. So what do I think of these changes? I don't love the rule change on the companion mechanic. There's no precedent, as far as I can remember, where they literally changed the mechanic to make the mechanic less broken. In any instance I can remember, it's always banned the card. But I think the problem here is that now we're talking about, 10 cards that would need to get banned from probably just about every competitive format. And I can see where that causes some problems for them. I think one of the biggest being is that it's probably going to be really hard to sell packs if they ban 10 cards out of the most recent set. So I get why they did it, but I do think this is a really awkward solution. I would have expected that they maybe came up with something a little bit more elegant than that. One of my main problems being is that this isn't printed anywhere on the card. You just need to know this. And for people that aren't super invested in the game, I think it's going to cause some issues. Obviously if you're a tournament player, if you're at FNMs all the time, word will travel and you'll figure it out pretty quickly. But I don't love when the information isn't on the card and I have to go look something up. Here's a case in point for a rules change that still bothers me to no end. Is when they change the way that damage interacts with planeswalkers, particularly from red spells. In the past, any damage that could be dealt to a player could also be dealt to a planeswalker, and a few years back they changed that. And the headache that creates now is that I play a lot of red. Whenever I play a red spell and there's planeswalkers on board, I now have to do a gatherer search to see if that card hits planeswalkers, and it's super frustrating to do. Now, this isn't quite that bad because you don't have to gather research every time you look at the card. Once you understand this, the ability applies the same to all of the companions, so I guess it's a little bit better in that sense. But I do feel like it's just not a very smooth solution, and like I said, feels pretty awkward. So all in all, I don't care for the change, but I do get why it needed to happen. I totally understand that Companion was breaking pretty much every other format. It is really strange to me that in Commander, before the rules change, companions were decent, but they weren't game-breaking in the same way that they were in every other format. Who knew that having essentially a commander in other formats would cause major problems? Now we know. But I did think it was just a little bit interesting and a little bit odd that they really didn't break Commander, but they just completely busted every other format. So that brings me to the main question of, after the rules change, are companions still worth it in EDH? I ran a little poll on my Twitter yesterday, and with almost 300 votes, I thought it was actually pretty divided. 43% saying yes, 56% saying no. Honestly, I would have thought that many more people would have voted no, because it does seem like a pretty big drawback, and now you're talking about having 2 drawbacks, the additional mana and whatever the original companion drawback is. And that does create a lot of hoops to jump through just to get this card into play, and oh, it's a creature, it's super fragile to any type of removal. So anyway, I thought about this more, I talked to a bunch of people about it, kind of got some other opinions on it, and here's what I think about the playability of companions in EDH going forward. I think they're pretty much going to stay out of high power decks. I think the drawback of limiting the cards that you have access to in some way is just going to be too steep for decks that want to win on turn 5, turn 6, turn 7 consistently. so I don't think you're going to see them very much in high power. And of course, there may be some exceptions in there. Case in point being Jegantha the Wellspring. Jegantha makes infinite colored mana minus blue with Freed from the Real really easily. So I could see that being a thing that people still want to take advantage of. And also I think the companion drawback on Jegantha is just a little bit less restrictive than some of the other ones. So I could see that one going forward, and like I said, there may be some exceptions here and there, but I think in general, if you're talking about stronger decks, I don't think you're going to see as much of these. We'll take Karuga for example. As cool as Karuga is, having card draw that you have easy access to, but now you can only play things that have converted mana cost 3 or greater, Simic already draws cards really well, so it's like, why do you need to jump through this hoop in order to have this card draw? So for Karuga, for a lot of the other ones, I think most of the time it's not really going to be worth it to jump through the extra hoops, to then pay extra mana to play this creature off curve, and hope that it doesn't get blown up before it's supposed to do whatever it's supposed to do. But in talking with some people about this, not everyone's completely out on them either. In a slower setting, if you're talking about games that are going to go more than 7 turns, then generating the 3 mana to get the thing into your hand probably isn't that bad. And there may be reasons that you want to have access to it late in the game, or, kind of mid to mid-late, maybe turn 7, turn 8, something like that. And there's definitely some cool stuff to do there. One of the main things that came up, if you're playing kind of a casual to mid-power kind of setting, is that deck flavor does matter to people, and having a companion does add an interesting amount of flavor to a deck, and does create some interesting deck building restrictions, and some interesting things to think about as you're building the deck. So there is still some cool stuff there, and I think when we look at the vote, I think that's why it's so divided. This is probably a good visual representation of who plays high power games and who doesn't. Not to say that's going to be true all the time. I play a little bit of both, and I'm more in the no category than I am in the yes category. But I think that at least explains some of the data. But yes, to some of the people that I did talk to that still want to use them in their decks, flavor was very important to them, and a companion changes the flavor of your deck. It'll also change mechanically which cards can go in your deck. And that does create a sense of uniqueness, which I think is important to a lot of EDH players. Most of my favorite decks are not the deck that you take the commander and you go to EDH Rec and you put in all the most popular cards associated with that commander. My favorite decks have a theme, have some sort of flavor. I love my Angels deck. I love my Legendary Blades deck, where you're not just putting in all the good stuff possible, where you're sticking to a theme and the deck is unique to itself. I think the companions still give you that. Now, I will say that 3 mana is a lot. Turning Zerda essentially into a 6-drop, that thing is not costed to be a 6-drop. Now, the thing is, you don't have to pay it all at once, so like if you're stuck on turn 3 with nothing to do, then obviously that's a good time to go grab your companion, so I get it. Not having to pay it all at once does make it a little bit more palatable in order to pay that cost. But on the other hand, yesterday I posted a Nethroi Umori deck, and that deck really wants Umori on 4. Getting a 7-mana Umori, I don't think that's really worth it for that deck. Now, even before the rules change, the companions are a trade-off. You give up something to get something, but I think the percentage of times that it's worth it to make that trade-off now go down significantly. What I think you're much more likely to see now, if you want to build around the companion, you might as well just make it your commander. It's going to come in at the right mana cost, you have repeated access to it in case it gets blown up, which, that's going to happen in the game of Commander. So in general, I think it makes a lot more sense to be running these out of the command zone, or putting them in the 99 of the deck. So that way you don't have to make that trade-off. You just get a good card that gives you a nice ability, and you don't need to sacrifice parts of your deck building in order to achieve that. But I totally respect anyone that wants to make their deck very flavorful. They're going for a certain sort of aesthetic when they're building their deck, and the companions can still give you that, but now you will have to pay some extra mana to be able to get them. So yeah, I don't want to go too long on this, but wrapping up there, I think that's what you're going to see. You might still see some companions in the casual to mid-power type settings, especially for those that are looking to make their deck more flavorful, going for a certain sort of theme. But I don't think you're going to see people taking advantage of companions as you get to the more high-power and competitive type decks. But like I said, they still make great commanders. If you really want that ability, just run it out of your command zone. Or if it fits in with your deck, just run it in the 99, and I think that's where they're going to be best suited. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. As always, feel free to comment, like, or subscribe. Thank you for watching. I want to thank my awesome Patreon supporters. We have one new Patreon supporter in Shari Narain. Shari, you are awesome. If you want to help support the channel and vote on which decks I play next, feel free to check out my Patreon at the link below. And be sure to use the TCG affiliate player link, as it helps support the channel and it doesn't cost you anything.